Peace Family 19 Keys tapping in. Today I have a very important subject that I've been wanting to get to for a while now, right? This is a subject that affects everybody, especially as we increasingly grow into a digital age where we don't know who controls our mind. And that's a big statement to make because most of us think that we're the one in control of our mind. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that you are Psy-Op proof? Do you think that somebody can brainwash you? Well, just by answering that question, yes, it actually means that you are more susceptible for a Psy-Op to be ran on you than anybody. And we're going to get into why. Now, the subject that I want to talk about that is so important is cognitive warfare and cognitive security. But first, let's start what is cognition. Cognition is defined, or it comes from the root words. I always like to start with root words. The root word cognoscere, meaning to get to know or recognize. The definition is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding, right, through thought, experience, and senses. Security comes from securus, meaning free from care or safe. The definition is the state of being protected from danger, threat, or harm. Cognitive security, once you add them together, equals protecting the mind's ability to think freely, accurately, and independently in a world designed to hijack thought, perception, and reality. Now, I want us to really hone down before we go deeper into this. And this is not just something that I've come up with. This is actually what the Department of Defense has designated as a new type of warfare, a type of war on consciousness itself. And why is this different from other warfare, such as just Psy-Ops, which are psychological operations that have been ran by the military this whole time? Well, by my estimate, it's because of complexity. We now live in a world that is so complex, and it has never been this complex ever before. And what do I mean by that? Well, nations used to be separated either by vast distances, right? And most of the time, the people who lived in those nations all had the same information diet and the same information environment. In fact, certain information and knowledge was mostly kept to the elites, right? This is why you had so much stagnation and progress when it comes to certain Renaissance ages and why Europe was in the dark age, because most of the knowledge was only held by a small few. It actually wasn't until the Moors came into Spain, right? And they started to democratize the access to knowledge, right? Which gave the access to the average person. This allowed people to think for themselves, to innovate as they got educated in science and astronomy and mathematics and architecture, right? Allowing them to think in completely new ways. And I think about that as how we have access to AI today, to where now you have access to literacy. You have access to degrees and skills that you normally could not have afforded, and quite frankly, was only kept for the elite, those who had access to that information in the first place. So I want to get into why it's so important and why I think this particular subject is the most important subject in the culture, because it affects every single last one of us, right? And I want you to think about yourself as we go through this process of identifying what is cognitive security and how strong is yours. Now, don't get me wrong, we're also going to talk about cognitive defense, right? Because there is a way to think about it as an individual. There's a way to think about it as a family, as a nation, as a country, as a continent, as a globe whole. So first, as we're thinking about cognitive security, we have to get into this idea of, thinking about how human beings at one point in time with our brains, we would only take in so much information in our environment, right? We actually have what you call system one thinking and system two thinking, right? System one thinking is essentially our automatic brain. Our automatic brain is like when you're walking down the street, you see a car, you see a threat, it teaches you how to move, how to think, how to process things, right? It is the fastest brain, right? It's 100 million times faster than system two thinking. System two thinking is our deliberate brain. It is the brain that actually has to process things, that actually has to think. Now, thinking is a very slow process. It's like 100 million times slower than our actual system one thinking brain, which is what we're normally using. Now, system one brain was so we can detect threats, we can move, we can ideally handle all these complex thinking. It's essentially if one would think about, right, your subconscious mind as it just takes in information and information and information, right? Not really thinking about it. But our brains were not built for iPads. Where's my iPad? I have one over here. But our brains are not built for iPads. Our brains are not built for the internet. So when we get on the internet, we have all this information. But when we first got on the internet, how did we interact with the information? Like it was truth, right? We have a certain way of thinking about information that's on the internet to where our brains are automatically taking in it as whole truth, not knowing whether it's true or not. And the average person not actually doing any research whatsoever. And that makes them the perfect target for manipulation. It's called MDM, right? Misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, right? You should know the difference when you're being fed misinformation, right? Or disinformation and malinformation. These are actual credible threats to your household. So think about it if you are a child, right? And you want to steer the direction of your family in a certain way as a parent, but that child is now on their tablet getting information on what it means to be a young boy or a man or even religion. Now it's changing the ideas. Now, what makes that child more susceptible to the ideas that they get on those phones is actually their psychological profile. It's about their cognition. Now, before we go into that, let's get a little deeper into, again, going back to what cognition is in the first place. It is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge, right? Think about how we acquire knowledge today and the understanding through thought, experience, and senses. So you can have a high cognition or you can have a very low cognition, right? When somebody has a low cognition, what do they have, right? This typically is when somebody is stressed, somebody has anxiety, somebody go through depression, right? Suicidal ideation. Now, think about the population that is most susceptible to that type of threat, right? You can make a profile of a certain type of person that it'd be easier to assuage or persuade. This is why the CIA will go after targets who are in politics, right? That they know have debts and things of that nature because they know that they are the target for manipulation. So don't matter if your organization bylaws and things of that nature is ran smoothly and is structured. And if you're not looking at the cognitive security of the people that is involved, then that's where you enter. Now, I want you all to think about the whole entire globe, or actually, let's think about the country and why the Department of Defense would think cognitive security is such a dangerous thing. Well, the reality of it is think about the citizens of America. When you think about the citizens of America, do you think that they are happy, joyful, or do you think that they are stressed out? I want you all to put that in the bottom. Do you think that Americans are happy, joyful, or stressed out? I can't see all of you all's comments, so I want to pull it up on my YouTube so I can track what you all are saying. And then we're going to move forward from there. Because this is about to get good. I'm not going to lie, man. I've been cooking on this subject. I've been studying it for a while now because I'm writing books, research papers, right? And I'm preparing an entire community around cognitive security and consciousness. So we're about to go to my page. Okay, good. I can see some comments now. Computer moving a little slower than I wanted to, but that's okay. All right. So y'all are saying people are stressed out. All right. So if people are stressed out, right? And who is the most stressed out population in America right now? The most stressed out population in America. Well, by the numbers and the statistics, we're going to look at, you named it, black men. Black men are the most stressed out population in America. They have the most anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, disease, all sort of different issues that are going on. Black men have the highest rate of issues. And this is not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the country. It's not a good thing for the culture. It's not a good thing for the family. It's not a good thing, especially for the individual themselves. Because we're susceptible to outside influence, manipulation, right? And to do things that we otherwise would not do if we had high cognition. So if I am looking at what population to go after, I'm going to take the statistics that we so readily share, including myself. I was talking about how black men have all of these issues, right, for a long time, and that nobody had been paying attention to it, right? And this is why you see such a huge shift that happened during the last election cycle, right? But when you see that and you study that population, you know exactly who to go after, right? And who's susceptible to change their mind on the whim and who would be the easiestly most manipulated. Now, there's one thing that could save black men when it comes to this manipulation, and we're going to go after that as well. Then, of course, number two would be who? The black woman. They just put out a report from the White House saying that they're going after student loan debt. Who has the highest student loan debt in America? You got it right. Black women. If black women has the highest student loan debt in America, it's somewhere around an average of 38,000, right? And they have the least amount of savings according to, right, the stats, and they have the lowest net worth. Then they're most likely are stressed out thinking about the future, right? So that means that when you're stressed out, your brain is open, right? You have a certain level of fear. When you're going through that fear, that's your mammalian brain. Your fear-based brain is your instinct brain, right? That's the brain that wants to feel good. It wants to feel pleasure. That's the brain that is not thinking. That's when you can present ideas. It's kind of like seeing black women stressed and presenting them the idea of feminism, and they latch on to it. Because psychologically, they're going to latch on to whatever is a solution to the problem that they were just given, right? Here's the fear, here's the soft. It's also the reason why pimps are able to beat a woman, right? And then they're able to comfort her at the same time because they created the fear. And in that moment of stress and fear, you latch on to whatever's closest that can help you, give you some security and comfort, even if it's the very thing that caused it. So they created this divide. They create an enemy, they create a problem, they create a boogeyman. This thing happened in cults and things of that nature. But we're specifically talking about the digital age, right? We're in a digital age and we look at social media, right? And we see rhetoric that are positioned. We see ideas that say that we are the solution. Hey, there's a problem. Here's the real issue, right? It's the manosphere, it's the red shift, it's the left, the Democrats. They always come in with a problem most of the time that they created. So we shift over there because they're constantly psychologically manipulating. Then there's the radical right to say, wait a minute, we have the problem to your solution. All the while, nobody's addressing the root problem and the issue in the first place. And this is why, as we say, mental health is really the mental hygiene, but it's really the cognitive security. So think about it in your own family. If I was to look at your family and I'm looking for the weakest link, I would create a psychological profile of who is the most stressed out, right? Who's the sad one, right? Then you go and solicit them. You would spread ideas, not directly, because you got to think about it. If you're a CIA agent, you'll meet to that young child that's going through issues with their parents, right? You see this in the movies all the time. Oh man, are you suffering with your father not letting you go out, or your mother don't understand you, right? Or you see kids in a ghetto that turn into gangs and things of that nature. Why? Because their cognition is low. They stressed out, right? So now they're susceptible to outside manipulation and influence that can hack their brain and their thinking. That can end up being what they leech on for comfort and security, because during that survival stage, that mammalian brain is activated. So now you're open. You're open to suggestion and you're listening to whatever you're being told, because what do you have to lose? Right? So when the cognition is low, there's less complexity there, right? When somebody's in survival mode, they're not thinking very complex. They just want to instinctually, right? Think instinctually, and they want to survive. That's it. I need to eat. I'm hungry. I need to make this action to get to this step. It's less complexity, and when there's less complexity, there's less consciousness. There's a scientific paper that speaks on the consilience of consciousness and complexity, which essentially is talking about the idea that when something becomes complex enough, it becomes conscious. So when we look at the culture, we ask, what is culture? Question that is often posed, right? And we give definitions to it all the time about shared values and things of that nature. But I propose the answer to be culture is consciousness in motion. It's not one single thing. It is not one single thing whatsoever. Culture is more complex than that. I actually have a framework of the 5 things that make up what culture is. But let's first focus on what the complexity of culture is. It's your language, the way we speak, which is why there's a different street culture, right? What's happening? What's going on? Or there was the slaves that had their culture, right? They would embed languages. They would speak certain ways so that the master could not listen, right? There are certain class levels to where there's a language at each class level. The higher the education, you're trained on different data, so you speak in different ways, express and behave in different manners. You're in environments of safety. Safety speaks different than a nervous system, right? And so every culture has its own language. So when I think about culture, I don't think about culture just in the sense that, it's this one thing when you say, hey, I'm a part of the culture. Well, what is the current culture, right? And essentially what you're doing is you're looking at what is the health of that culture. Because it's the same thing of saying, yo, I'm a part of my family. Okay, well, what is your family currently, right? How do y'all speak to each other, right? Is it healthy? Are you a part of a healthy dynamic? We think about family as this crystallized thing, but it's an ever so changing thing. As you get older, the family changes. What is the family? That's the question that we don't ask a lot because most of the time we do not have a family Bible. We don't have a family office, right? Like rich people have a family office. They have consistent meetings, right? They have consistent direction, trajectory, right? Their skills and training. They setting up trust. They're getting access to deal flows and they're having meetings and things of that nature. You have a family office. There's events that are planned around it. We have a very chaotic family because there is no plans. It's just anarchy and dysfunction, which means that there are no roles. So how do we speak to each other? And if I wanted to grade your family and just by the language, I would look at the words you use, right? If we say, what is the current hip hop culture? Well, we would look at those who are the purveyors of that culture, the rappers, right? We would look at, but the one thing that we never understand about the current hip hop culture is the industry, which is the business side. And what we don't hear, because we hear the lyrics, we hear the songs once they come out, but we don't hear behind the scenes, the meetings. We don't hear what the lawyer is saying. We don't hear what the manager is saying. We don't hear what the record label owner is saying, which is all a part of that culture, right? In which decisions are being made, acts are being made, people are expressing themselves because it's not just art, it is also commerce, right? It is money involved. So the fact that we're not getting access to the language that is used behind the scenes to make the decisions of us being represented, right, is why we have a lackluster picture of what culture really is, specifically hip hop culture. Kanye West is a perfect example, right? Oftentimes we look at the artist, but what about the intention of the artist, which we'll get to a little later, or maybe in another video? But intention matters, right? So Kanye West recently came out with a song called Cousins. And in this song, he had expressed the most taboo thing that used to be the most taboo thing in the culture, right? But why is it not so taboo anymore? Well, there's been extreme normalization into a lot of different things that have happened, right, recently, right? Specifically in the LGBT community and hip hop. We now have rappers that are in the LGBT community or who are sassy or who are dandy or who are feminine. And Kanye West was actually one of the people who helped normalize this and one of the ones who helped defend it. In the video, he talks about sexual acts that he had with his younger male cousin when he was younger, right? So the reason that this can happen, of course, and there's nobody really bats an eye to it, and it's not a huge discussion. Number one, we are in the age of information. An age of information, there's too much information coming at you at once, right? This decreases your ability to focus and this puts you in a consistent state of distraction, right? Never having clarity of the mind, always with this automated mind, taking in information. And the more you hear something, right, the more frequent it becomes your frequency. You may not realize it. Why? Because you'll put down your wall, right? You go on social media and you're scrolling and your wall is down. You're not stopping at every single post and asking what is the intention, the bias, that this information is true, is it well researched, right? You're not looking at when somebody says they have a new research paper and they just discovered something. You're not looking at the source. You're not looking whether it's been cited before by other scientists or whether it's truly been peer reviewed or whether somebody just paid to have a paper or whether it was something that was created and conjured by ChatGPT and somebody that has a platform decided that they wanted to run with that narrative. And because most platforms are just taking content from other content creators, that it is not truth whatsoever. It's just misinformation or disinformation or malinformation. And you don't realize that you're building your mind up with lies. And that means that you're building your reality up with lies because there's no filtration process. Because most people, let's just be honest, don't have time to think. Thinking is a deliberate man's game. It is a much slower process to slow down and ask yourself, what am I taking in? So we have two different diets, right? We have our physical diet, food, but then we have our information diet. And we don't talk enough about, right, our mental hygiene and our information hygiene. When are we clearing our cache of content? Are we taking steps back and doing detoxes, right? Are we cutting people off who are too toxic? Are we cutting out content that has nothing to do with our goals, right? That can actually start to affect our goals because it can start messing with what they call hypofrontality, right? Hypofrontality essentially, hypo meaning low. The frontal is talking about the frontal lobe, which is responsible for that focus and stimulation. When it requires consistent high stimulation to feel something, right? We are constantly seeking and searching for it on the phone, right? Looking for a dopamine hit, looking for some pleasure and some stimulation over and 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 over in everything that we do, right? Because most people do not have the ability to focus anymore because it has been stolen. And because your reality in real life, you're stressed out, you're seeking something that will get you out of that stress. So those who are going through poverty, those who are going through stress and depression, those are the ones that are on social media more. And the people who are making the content are making it specifically so you stay on social media more. Because the more we're learning about neuroscience and marketing, we're running Psy-Ops on each other, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, because we're in a free market called capitalism. And as long as I am making money, anything that I do to you is justified. That's the current world. This is dangerous for a country, though. When I went to Japan, Japan doesn't allow a lot of outside influence into their country because they're worried about the cognitive security, right, and control of the culture. Now, there's something called narrative warfare, right? Eventually, I'm going to train you all to really understand narrative warfare and how to see it as you're going around, right? There was a case with a young boy who got into it with another boy on school grounds. This has turned into a racially inflamed issue on social media, right? Why? There's certain headlines that you'll see over and over when there's one big radical event that happens. People will be utilizing the same language. Oh, this culture can't be cured. They turn it into a black versus white thing, right? There's these nationalists that are behind it that want to push certain agendas. So they turn it into a narrative, sharing information over and over. Now, who is this affecting the most? Not the most intelligent. The people who have the most money and intelligence have time to think. So therefore, they're not getting caught up in the narratives the same way. Not exactly the same way, but they are on social media. And social media creates this sort of environment. So even they are not realizing which information is real and which information is false. And when are they being into someone's psychological operation that is deflecting and getting them to think about something that is not true? Because the reality of it is that the boy's father is friends with other black people, and he said that this is not a race thing. Then how did the narrative that this is a race thing happen? I'll give you another prime example, something that happened throughout history, right? In history, you look at the scheduling of drugs. How did drugs get scheduled the way that they are? Well, most people would think it came out of, well, just pure concern for citizens who were doing drugs. You'll be wrong. You'll be absolutely wrong. It was actually an operation to attack civil rights leaders and hippies. Why? Because the hippies wasn't going with the narrative that America wanted to feed its citizens, specifically about war, right, and the racial politics in America. So you have civil rights leaders, right, who is opposing the government. The government wants to look good. Remember, it's trying to build as a global superpower, right? And it has things with the UN and things of that nature when it comes to human rights. So they don't want the rest of the world to look at them as racist, right? They don't want the civil rights to have so much power to affect the narrative in the media. And it used to be so much easier to control people when that you can utilize just legacy media, right? You got the print, you got the newspaper, you got the TV, and they had control over all of them. But then this pesky little thing called social media comes. Now, the reality of it again is get back to the scheduled drugs. Now, this is not by my own words. This is from when they created the war on drugs. They needed a narrative. They needed a headline, right? Something that you couldn't tell who they was actually going after. So how do we go after the civil rights leaders without saying there's a war on blacks? Well, what you do is you connect, right, heroin to blacks, and that's what they did. Then you connect weed to hippies. That's what they did. So now, when we're saying we need the department, right, to give us funding for these initiatives, these programs, to create this narrative, to have this war, right, on drugs, heroin, and marijuana, then we create these scheduling classes, right, to where we can lock them up, right, and we can go after them however we want to in the name of the war on drugs. And this is how you start to get scheduling differences. So now they started making up stories about how drugs was affecting people and your brain go crazy and things of that nature, right? This was a whole entire psychological operation that was ran on the people that was later admitted by the Nixon generation, or not Nixon, but Ronald Reagan. It was just admitted by him. So now when we think about drug scheduling, we think it's just based on safety when it's really just on politics. And it was a war on blacks and specifically politically conscious white people, which were called hippies at the time. You give them a name, you designate them so you can go after them. You connect something to them that correlates with them. And then you go after that thing that's connected to them. So you are abstractly talking about them. And you have to recognize when people are talking about you by just connecting things to you. So when somebody say a war on crime, who are they talking about? You. When they say that they're going after student loan debt, right? Who are they talking about? You. Well, it depends on who's connected to it. This is why narrative warfare is so important. And as we on social media, if you're not thinking about cognitive security, specifically for you and your children, right? Think about it in households in America. Black men didn't know that women will be reading magazines and they will be entering into feminism. Now, feminism on its heels looks like a very good thing, but when you go into deep thralls of it, you realize it has deep ties into white racial superiority, aka so-called white supremacy, right? And so then we didn't realize the subtleness that was being sold to our women and how it would have a wedge and a divide in the household. Because on premise, you would think rights for women is a very good thing. And it is. But you have to think about the philosophies that was connected to that. Who is funding that? Whose agenda is that for? Right? And who would it affect the most? So white women ran a Psy-Op on black women, co-opted them for their network, but who benefited the most was white women. We are in 2025, and black women are some of the most educated in the country, yet they have most of the debt in the country and still has not risen. So the things that we tried have not working. But who told us to try these things in the first place? Black men went through the same thing through 1976 to 2010. There was a rise of enrollment of black men going to school, right? They would go to school, but then when a lot of people would come out of school, they would start talking about their debt, lack of opportunities. Actually, there was no income increase whatsoever. There was actually a decrease. There was a net worth decrease, and there was, of course, a consistent rise in debt. So, safe to say, school did not work. So it was black men stopped believing in school, right? And so it created this nihilist view of school in the first place, right? And education. And instead of giving more opportunities, studying the root cause, right? Studying the biasness in the workplace and things of that nature, of why these educated men could not get the same jobs, get the same wage increase or opportunities of other people that are coming out of school. There was not enough statistics that will share a narrative to let people know, maybe take up a trade or the type of degrees that they should be going after in the first place. So unfortunately, there may have been some people, but they did not have the ability to run a full complex Psy-Op to get people to understand it. So here we are, 2025. Now, if you go on TikTok, you might see a young girl saying how she doesn't like men, right? And that men are the enemy and the patriarch is the enemy. And then what is solution? This girls club, right? And so it's easy for you present a monster and issue a problem and then immediately a solution to them, right? What is going on with their cognitive environment? So when I'm looking at the country is in disarray. America is in disorder, right? There's consistent conflict. There's no unity. There's no true patriotism, right? There's civil war type of issues that is happening. And as we go into the complexity again, we look at the music of a culture. So what is the music of America? The current music of America is hip hop. It is the most popular genre globally, but specifically in America. Well, if we look at the music that Americans are listening to the most. So think about it like this. When AI wants to source information, what it does is it goes and checks on what sources are most frequently used. So whatever's the frequency becomes the frequency they pull from that source. And when you're asking a question, they're not really regarding whether it's true or who had access to put out research papers in the first place. Don't have time to be doing all that bias. So whether certain languages have been translated. No, it's going to the signal that is the loudest. And the signal that is the loudest in American music is black music. But currently, black music is not good music. And the question becomes, who is the number one enemy in black music? Well, I'll answer for you if you don't know. The number one enemy in black music is the black man. Who used to be the number one enemy in black music? The political system. The lyrics about politics and consciousness. Fight the man. Fight the powers that be. This is what people were tapped into. And then all of a sudden, it turned into the N-word being rapidly used more than the word God. So the degradation, demoralization started to happen. But this was not by accident. This is what people who understood how to embed COINTELPRO type of activities into the culture. It was intentionally and deliberately done, right? To help fund the private prison industry, to demoralize, degrade, and subvert the culture into thinking, right? And decrease of values. So if the American music genre is hip hop, what is going on in the American mind? Now we understand why the white man is the worst, why the black woman is always being degraded, right? And why there's no unity whatsoever in the country. If you see a people who have music that is politically conscious, which it used to be, and it's not by my own admission, there was actually studies that was done on the amount of words that was utilized, right? And how there was an actual shift in certain words that were utilized. And then you can track demoralization, crime rates, prison populations, private prison stocks, all to this, crime rising. They never usually do actual root studies in criminology to understand how did these things get embedded and how did these things start, because they're not trying to stop it. It's never been a part of the narrative. Now let's go to media. Media. Media is such a powerful tool because storytelling is such a powerful tool, right? The beauty of everything I'm talking about is that it actually comes with a very powerful solution to each, which is why I'm studying in the first place. This is why I'm on tour right now in the first place, because how do you save yourself? You give people the tools to save themselves. And I truly believe that when we increase the consciousness of the culture, it is the very way to save ourselves. When I was younger, I used to work on my complexity. I didn't want to be like my environment. I used to think about how the information environment of the people around here was all the same. Kind of like thinking about that movie, Who Cloned Tyrone, right? How you're creating the same clones over and over and over. Simple-minded fools reacting to a system. It's not their fault, right? But without that complexity, you don't have that consciousness. So think about a baby. A baby starts off with a low level of consciousness. Before the age of 6, it's not thinking for itself at all. It is in a low beta state, right? It is not until later after the age of 6 to where you can start coming up with some of your own thoughts, right? And you're thinking for self. Otherwise, you're just a sponge. That system one thinking, that automatic thinking, you're taking in and being shaped by the influence, the environment, everything around you. So now you want to know who that child is. Think about what their environment was when they were younger. Either they're going to have to deprogram or reprogram, or they have a super program when they were young. It's very important because how that child react is what the adult layers on top of it and how they react in certain situations. And it goes directly into the dependency models that they create later on that becomes their identity. So when I was young, I used to study books that I know people wouldn't expect for me to read. I used to go to places that I know people wouldn't expect for me to go. And I used to force myself to have interest in things that I know people in my environment did not have, right? I didn't just want to know what was going on in the local blocks and the streets that we lived in, from St. Louis to Oakland. I wanted to know what was happening outside of my information environment. Now, luckily for me, we grew up in the hood, but we also went through a private school, a private Black Muslim school, right? This is where you get the different dichotomy of thought. So here I am in a street environment, very dangerous environment, if I would add. But then my school is completely different and opposite of that environment, teaching me the very opposite things of my lived experience as I would go outside, get into fights, get into trouble, get into crime. But then I would always have these other interests as well, and the school would help feed those interests as well. But then that's what cultivated that within me, and I always had an independent way of thinking. And unbeknownst to myself, I didn't realize that I was developing a certain complexity from my taste in music, the words I use, the interest in arts, right? My interest in literature and knowledge. I would go to school and we would drill all summer. The kids on the block did not understand that. So I was able to contrast myself, right, to see who they were and see who I was, which was developing this level of consciousness. I had an understanding of who the enemy was, right? I understand that the enemy was this system, right? And that these children were being indoctrinated with ideas that did not come from their ancestors. It was making them controllable. They were the most susceptible to narratives that I didn't believe in, such as Christmas. I always thought the rest of the children were fools to believe in Christmas, to believe in this fat white man sliding down your chimney and you're giving him cookies, making him fatter, and somehow he's diabetic resistant. No matter how many cookies he eat in the night, he don't get sick. And he has an infinite amount of energy, infinite amount of cold fusion powered up slave from reindeers who magically never get tired. And he has an infinite budget to know and to spy on kids in a very creepy way and put them on a list of nice or naughty. I just thought that narrative was stupid. And so I didn't believe in it at all. Of course, growing up Muslim, we didn't believe in it because we was taught it was false. But I just looked at the other children as unfortunate because you have to be simple-minded to believe in that. When a child is intelligent enough, they're aware that it's false and they choose to believe in it to entertain themselves through imagination if they want. But there's something called strategic imagination, which I'll get into at another time. So I always had a complexity growing up in the streets, growing up in this Muslim environment, seeing my mother in the Nation of Islam, seeing my father in a different offset, watching my older brother as he was going through life, going through my own lived experience, seeing how other people would view me, contrasting from my friends, studying things that was outside of my information environment. This helped me develop a complexity, and then later on going through all of these different type of experiences. And every year since I left that school, I would go through a different school every single year up until my first year in college, meaning from sixth grade up until college I went to a different school. All of this develops a certain complex web of thinking, geographical location, different cultures, different ethnic groups, right? You have to have a level of adaptability and resilience. This is what happens. We grew up in a dangerous school. People are getting shot outside. People are selling drugs inside. It was wild. It was gang activities. It was crooked sheriffs, cops, crimes, deals going on. Your mind is having to house all of these things. You're growing up in danger. You become what they call hypervigilant. Man, this is very important to understand. This is where anxiety can become a good thing. You know, like don't you say somebody's watching me? Well, if you're always thinking somebody's watching you, if there's ever a moment when somebody is, you probably catch them. Anxiety can be a good thing because you become hyper vigilant, and that means your brain is always scanning for threats. This is why, though, even though black men may be growing up in environments where they may be stressed out and things of that nature, growing up in the streets, you're always scanning for threats. The problem is when you get in an environment that you're not used to, and somebody offers you a contract, somebody offers you a deal, and you finally feel safe, and you feel like this is a solution to your fears, and then you let your guard down. And now you're willing to sign whatever on the dotted line. Here you go. Hand you the contract. Your street smart's not kicking in. Stop. Don't sign that contract. Think. Be hyper vigilant. Watch out for the brainwash. Activate your system two thinking. And those who have that ability to go from system one thinking to system two thinking can operate within flow. But many people weren't taught to have that level of mental defense. Best coffee in the world. Matter of fact, this is cognitive defense. You know what I mean? The reason I put Supermind on it, the reason I wanted to have this in the first place is because our brains are being fried through technology, right? This has lion's mane mushroom in it that actually helps you grow new neurons, right? It helps with the myelination process, which is the shifting, essentially electricity being able to flow between neurons. After the age of 25, these things stop developing as much. So you need something to stimulate this. Then you have the physical body, right? So this is like cognitive defense in a cup, consciousness in a cup. So anything that I do, I don't do it simply to do it, right? I'm not sitting here sipping on mushroom coffee just because it tastes good, right? And I throw a little cinnamon in there. I do it because it's part of my cognitive defense rituals. Now, most people don't have any cognitive defense rituals because they're not thinking about it. They're not thinking about their brain and how it's changing as they're aging. So they're not doing things to stimulate it, but they're trying to figure out why. And this actually throws into a spiral. The ignorance is dangerous because now you don't know why your brain doesn't connect patterns because at the age of 25, it changes. You don't know that you go through hormonal changes leading up into your late 30s, right? And so now you don't know why you're less willful, right? And why you're not getting as much pleasure from your activities. And then you throw in the phone and you're sitting there stuck. And now your brain is being rewired to where you can't focus anymore and you don't have any activities to stimulate it. So now you're drinking regular coffee, you're watching games and things of that nature that's making it worse and sending you down this spiral. And so if you're not hyper vigilant about it, your defense system is down. And that's when anything can enter your crown. So it is something you have to be intentional about. It's not something you can play with. Now, make sure y'all go to asupermind.com. A Supermind. Is it A Supermind Coffee or A Supermind? Let me make sure. I don't want to be sending y'all down a rabbit hole somewhere that ain't right. Let me make sure. Y'all go follow this on IG as well. Get you a cup of consciousness, man. We're going to get you right. Yeah, asupermind.com. All right, all right. This is for people who don't even drink coffee. This is consciousness in a cup. This is Supermind. Anytime you see me with this red cup, that's what we got going on. So back to it. So if, and this is as research proves, right? If complexity produces consciousness, this is why scientists have been showing that they've been finding more organisms that they say, oh, are conscious. All of a sudden. Now we start zooming out and say, wait a minute. What if the universe is conscious? Well, it's sort of a duh moment, right? Because of course the universe is conscious. It's a very complex web and system, and it's consistently advancing. But what about the country? Is America conscious? Well, what constitutes that consciousness that goes into that complexity? Remember, we had language. We got language. Now it's a very complex language, right? We have people who speak slang. We have people who speak traditional English, King's English. Then you have people who are over excelled. If you think about Malcolm X, he had a very complex relationship with language and his ability to be able to express himself because he read the dictionary. Then we have music. And of course, if you watch Sinners and Ryan Coogler, you understand the power of music, right? And how that music can embed certain frequencies and have us in certain states. There's a difference between listening to white noise music as you're working on something, trying to focus, versus listening to rock music. Rock music, learned from Dr. Wesley, can actually kill plants. But there's frequencies that can heal plants, such as the earth frequency. Right? So you can be listening to white noise that will actually help you focus, and then you can be listening to something that will consistently, erratically break focus. So music matters because it tunes us into the state and the frequency that we're in. It has an effect on our mood and our mind and our behavior. It can produce certain erratic states in the body that can affect your breathing pattern, that can make you angry. Appreciate you, Stacy Galore. So the music we listen to has a direct effect, and we have forgotten the power of the music itself. So when there's people listening to blues music, the only problem with blues music is it kept you in the blues. It kept you down because you were just circulating how you was feeling. Oh, I've been round. I ain't gonna get me started. Let me stop playing. I thought I had something for a second. So you sitting there listening to the blues, and you getting the blues, and you staying blue, and nothing is changing for you, right? It's sort of like now rappers make pain music, circulating the pain, right? But if you're only listening to things that make you feel the way you felt when you first felt them, you're stuck in a time loop. So that type of music keeps you in a loop. You understand me? And so now we have this music that is either distraction music, right? You might be listening to something that say, what the hell? It's mindless music, right? It's just completely about distracting the mind for a moment. There's no thought, there's no complexity whatsoever in it. It doesn't require any attention. It's just background. Matter of fact, it's just meme music. Meme music is for those who have no time and no attention, who has no complexity, no thought process whatsoever. It is just supposed to hit the animalistic mind. What the hell? That's the only part of the song that I know. Because that's the only part of the song that matters. It is meme music, right? There was the time when Soulja Boy made music for the ringtone. So people started making it because they was connecting to commerce and how they can sell something real quick through digital distribution. It doesn't need to be a full song as long as people will listen to this one particular part and they will want this played on their phone when somebody is calling them over and over and over and over. Then TikTok comes, and then it was made based on the consumption of TikTok. Small 30-second increments, 5 minutes, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, just to do a quick dance. It's not meant to shift your political consciousness, to think about something, to absolve you of ideas. It's not what it's there for. It has no thought in it. It's not Tupac's Brenda as a baby or changes. You understand me? It's not Nas, I ruled the world, if I ruled the world. It's not Lauryn Hill. It's none of those things that are stimulating your consciousness, not just having you thinking, but having you feeling. It's not immersion music. That's the type of music that has optimized the consciousness. Why? Because that is futurism music. It's beyond survival. It's evolution of thought. It makes you feel. It connects you to and binds you to all your senses. Those musical notes elevate you into harmony. The rest of the stuff keeps you in a constant state of survival with small doses of stimulation. It's like the new drug. Then, of course, we got media, we got music. Now let's talk about media for a second. Media is the most powerful thing as we talk about storytelling, because storytelling allows us to be immersed in something. We feel it. We feel like we wanted a character, certain archetypes, which is why certain stories are not told, and they're definitely not told twice. Meaning, it's a reason why Lovecraft Country did not get a second show, because it was working too well. It was connecting you to history. It was empowering you from the past. It was projecting you into the future. Thoughts from Octavia Butler, proposing the question, are there black people in the future? Which my question is a little different. I'll ask you all at the end. So they say, no, we can't have that, because we understand how powerful media is. And although we want to make money off your community, we don't want you having the ability to give your community cultural security by giving them cultural or cognitive sovereignty to where they're thinking for themselves. They're decentering our narratives and our ideas. I mean, let's go with religion, and I'm going to come back to media. Think about Christianity, and shout out to all my Christians that are out there, but it's a reason we don't practice Coptic Christianity or the Ethiopian form of it, but the form of Christianity that we focus in our translations are given to us by our colonizers. The Coptic Christians will tell you that God is within. How come their translation and their version of it is not enough? Because if you were given it from them, you would practice from them. The only reason you practice of it the way that you do today is because of who gave it to you. They said that you couldn't practice being a Muslim. They said that you could not practice hoodoo, your spiritual systems that you got from Africa or from the Congo. They decided that. They said that it was rich work and devil's work. They put those narratives in your head, and now you espouse those narratives to protect your beliefs. But are they your own? Are they your own thoughts in the first place? How do you know what you even think about politics, getting back to media? See, the way Donald Trump was able to win is because they have what they call red media. Red media, there was a study that was done about media and how it had this shift. And essentially, you took podcasts that were just about entertainment and comedy and things of that nature, and they were co-opted with philosophies and ideas. These philosophies and ideas started to become discussed. It made these podcasts a little more complex. They started to discuss ideas about masculinity, gender affirming identity, trans, and things of that nature. The politics of Joe Biden and Obama and what was going on with COVID and all these different things. These are the discussions that were started to be had, right? That turned them political. That means that the ideology around them was shifting more so to the red. This allowed people who were dissatisfied, because I was always taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that 100% dissatisfaction brings about a change. That dissatisfaction becomes an open window. You catch people when they're not feeling good, right? Now they have the opportunity, and shout out to Miss Mahogany. Now they have the opportunity to find people who are misaligned and realign them with new values. That is when you're open to suggestibility. So what they did is through narrative warfare, they went and got these podcasts that they know had your attention, that you were coming to, that connected those audiences with new ideas, and then they was able to convert that attention into action politically. And so that's when you get the Joe Rogans of the world. That's not controlled by mainstream media. He has his own thought process. And for those who continue to think that they're independent thinkers by listening to him, he's spreading the ideas that are connected to the guests that he have on the show, i.e. Donald Trump comes on the show. Not just Donald Trump, but all the people who believe in Donald Trump as well. Elon Musk is on the show. Peter Thiel, I don't know if he's on the show, but his ideas espoused on the show, right? You get philosophers like Curtis Yarvin, right? These are people that if you look into, you would start to see a connection, a web of ideas that will spread. So they utilize media to spread ideas. This turns into a vote. This vote turns into Donald Trump being in the White House currently. And so here we are in 2025. Now, if we look at black media, what are the current topics on black media? Now, let's take mine out. Mine is the outlier, but I am one of the bubbles that is on there, right? I am a big bubble on there, right? Because we have a lot of influence. And so when you have a high level conversation, it's something that stimulates the neocortex. That is the part of brain that filters information to higher order thinking. That is the part of brain that is hypervigilant, right? That can help stop the brainwashing in the first place. But nobody comes to fund that because most of those people were comfortable. The boule was comfortable. They didn't know that there was going to be a threat that was going to be credible that was coming after them as well. They think that they knew better, think that they are better. And so didn't realize that these platforms are very powerful, right? And can be utilized in this cognitive warfare. I'm speaking to my peoples. I'm speaking to black men and black women. And of course, there are people from all around the world who listen as well. But when we talk about optimizing the consciousness of our people as a defense system, as a mental firewall, so that they cannot be hacked and taken advantage of by an outside force, whether that's Russia, whether that's China, whether that's America, or anybody that is not a part of the culture, this was the breeding grounds to do it. So when we look at the media today, who is controlling and funding it? Is it the educators in the culture? Is it the revolutionaries? Is it the philanthropists that are high level? No, what is being controlled by is those who can get deals in gambling, those who can get deals through weed or liquor. These are the main funders of the black media today, the advertisement world, or it might be McDonald's, fast food, all things that are connected to fast death, fast culture. Nothing that is about optimizing the consciousness, the cognitive security, and having people think higher in the hypervigilant state to where they're trying to optimize themselves or their thinking. Everything that makes them more of a threat. The gambling makes you more of a threat. People gamble more during bad economies. And when you have a nihilistic view on the world to where you feel like everything is owned by the elites and there's nothing that you can do, so you rather take a risk. Risky behavior comes from low cognitive security in the first place. You're trying to latch on to something to save you. Then we got the liquor. So instead of them tapped into the supermind, which is something that they need during this time that we're living in, especially if you want your cognitive performance to be enhanced during this time, no, they're telling you to drink more liquor, and every celebrity has them a liquor bottle, a liquor sponsor. It's more, drink, even though that it's been actually scientifically shown, right, that not even one glass of liquor is good for you. Now, specifically when your cognitive is low, you shouldn't be taking anything because this could have a more of effect on your mental health. Then there's the studies on how the weed is affecting the black man's mind and the brain, and it could have effects to bipolarism, and it can decrease masculinity, but specifically by decreasing testosterone, right? The seat house of the willpower, that very thing that makes you want to live, that makes you want to do the thing, even if it's hard. So we've been attacked. And then we look at the subject matter. Oh, you can't talk about nothing that's too powerful. So if we look at the people that become the archetypes, that become the loudest voices in the culture, we have these crazy uncle characters. We have these characters that are black white supremacists in the mind. We take a Kanye West and he gets a Nick Fuentes on his show. espousing his ideas and his hatred for black culture, all because he wants some attention. He can never feed the significance within himself, and it leaves a gaping hole. So the black media is not being used the right way, but then there are some really good, dope people that's out there, right? Young voices, powerful voices that need to be in alliance to help shape narrative and the cognitive alliance that needs to happen. So media is one of the most powerful tools, because this is where you get a Ryan Coogler who creates a movie that is so powerful that it can help shift the consciousness, that it stirs conversations, that requires the neocortex to be activated, that has people going back in their past and thinking in an empowered way, that are watching movies that are showing archetypes of us destroying our enemy and the outsiders that come in as vampires, and then projects us into the future, has us having conversations about spirituality and studying ourselves and the effects that this world has had on us. This is good for the cognitive security. Strategic imagination is good. The way we think about ourselves, the way we feel about ourselves is all connected and tied to what we do. Somebody say weed is okay, bro. You don't have to smoke every day. That is true. The problem is that most people don't have discernment of discipline. So let's say even if it was 10% of people who have an issue, 20%, 30%, can they afford it? It always comes down to affording. Shout out to Stacy Galore, said nature holds the key to our aesthetic, intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual satisfaction. This is a fact. But how many of us are in nature? How many of us are taking our feet off and grounding? How many of us are living in alignment in cosmological order with the universe? How many of us are in this active practice that is April 25th and the heavens are smiling upon us because the planets are aligning with a smiley face? But we will look at the emoji of our phone more than we will look into the sky. The ancients were all in alignment with cosmological order, from ancient Christians to ancient Muslims. It is this modern people who have disconnected from spiritual technology. So therefore, they don't know when to do things. Ancient people understand when the moon will have an effect on us, and they would say to fast, because they understand the biological connection, that they didn't want the people cognitively, right, to have their defenses down. So when these different phases and cycles are affecting us, it's kind of like thinking about a woman as she goes through her cycle. It is the direct correlation. See, a woman is in that cosmological connection because she cannot get rid of it, because she knows that there's going to be a pull. Her body is going to consistently go through a detox. But that is how all of us, the woman is not the only one that goes through the cycle. The man goes through a daily cycle. Then you interrupt that frequency with the digital, and then the manipulation, and then the marketing, then the branding, then all these different people who want your mind. If we boycott everybody, they suffer. But everybody's been boycotting us, and we suffer. But what do we do about it? When you don't have time to think, you can't plan. You can't produce your own future for yourself. Cognitive security is very important. Then we go past media. We can get into economics, we get into finances, we get into spirituality. We can get into all these things, but then we will go even deeper than that, because that's just talking about the one. That's just the complexity of the culture. But think about that as a person. Now I'm gonna go stop on this last part because we only here for 1 hour and 19 minutes. Let's think about collective memories. If I ask you all today, what is the collective memory of the country? We think about Cold Wars, we think about civil wars, we think about slavery, and we'll think about all of the events that have happened recently, the COVIDs, the recessions, the elections. Now, are these positive or negative? These are negative traumatic events. That is the country's memories collectively. The country itself, remember, is a conscious system. We are no longer a simple world anymore. We're connected through streams, frequencies. We're connected through highways, seaways, byways, skyways, Wi-Fi's. We're connected through AI systems, transports, airplanes. We're connected through all of these different things. Our children are talking to each other from across the world. The information environment is no longer simplistic. Our trade, our import and export, all interconnected. The world has become complex. And that complexity affects us, so controlling that complexity is not the same. So when I ask what is the memories of the culture? Cold War nightmares. America fears. America fears the rise of its own people. America fears its obsolete, its fall of an empire. That is the current narrative of America. But those memories matter because unless you can reshape those memories and make them something positive and they have a positive story, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is where the people are destined to go. That is the current cognition of that particular culture, that people. And so the American collective consciousness is not at all healthy. The images inside the American mind is not healthy. But who's shaping that in the first place? That's a question for another day. Now let's look about the culture. What is the collective memories of the culture? Oftentimes we talk about it in its negative. We're going to look at Black Wall Street. We're going to look at the revolutionaries who died, right? We're going to look at the issues and the problems that persist consistently. And even the memory right now is a red goddamn balloon when we think about the healthy relationship between the sexes. But specifically, if we're talking about the collective culture, the memories in the mind of the culture, because this is what the culture is. It is the law of recency. What is in the collective memory of recent is what we're all collectively feeling and thinking. Then there is what is in the core memory of it. Is it trauma? Or is it celebration? Is it joy? This is how the collective memory is focused. So when you create a movie that is just about a slave, then that's the collective memory that recycles the trauma. You get A Color Purple, you get a 12 Years a Slave. You listen and you watch all 50 Cent shows, then it reinvigorates the street consciousness. So now all those memories are consistently stifled. The show's are all about survival. You don't see yourself on other planets. You don't see yourself in other worlds. You don't see yourself as heroes enough to be immersed in these ideas of this is who you are, because something has to become a belief before it becomes a reality. Before it is clear. So I want to ask you about the culture's memory. The way you change that, number one, is through education and imagination. You teach the truth about the culture. You teach the truth of who we are, where we come from. You change the narrative that is in the mind of the people. From the past to the future and the present. Strategic imagination is a very powerful tool when you understand how to use it. Now let's think about the family, your family. What are the memories in your family, the collective memories in your family? Are they good or are they bad? Are they trauma? Is it the uncle? Is it mom's and pop's divorce? Right? Is it the discommunication between the family? See, if you don't have the family memory are not positive and there's not a new story, then the family will stay dysfunctional. Then when we think about our own core memories, when we think about ourselves, our core memories that make up our very identity, do we surround ourselves by what we went through, the trauma of what we went through? Or is it invigorated in our glory and who we are and how powerful we are? What is our story that we tell ourselves? What is in the core memory that makes up our consciousness and who we think we are? Because then you know when you are susceptible to manipulation. Then you know when your brain is not thinking and you're taking in information. There was a team, a SEALs team, I believe, that was in the Middle East somewhere. And they were trying to get past the defense systems, right, of these extremist groups. Now, this defense system is well advanced, very advanced, right? Technology, they got the cameras up, they got the security systems up, everything. But they need to get past all of that. They need to figure out a way to get through it. And so what they did is instead of going after the technology, they went after the humans. Well, how would they do that? They went after the human cognition. They seen that there was rabbits in the environment. So what they did was, since there was rabbits in the environment that everybody would know would drive past, they understand what the humans are seeing. They would take the rabbits and they would have the rabbits run into the perimeter. The rabbits would run in the perimeter and then the alarm will go off, right? And they would do this over a span of days, of weeks, until every time that the alarm will go off, what do you think started to happen? They started taking this threat less and less serious, right? Because they were normalizing this particular behavior all the way to a point where the security got slower and slower and slower and slower and slower and slower because they had developed a feedback loop to understand it. To one point in time, when the alarm went off, nobody came at all. And then that was that night that they was able to enter and get past the defense system. What had happened? Technology worked very well, but it was the cognitive behavior, the cognitive warfare, because we have a connection to these technologies. And it is actually the way that we use them and our feelings and our connections to them that they're manipulating and controlling. And we don't even realize how a Psy-Op may be ran on you. Another example was there was a guy who had loaded up a bunch of phones in a wagon, and he took this wagon and he would then walk it down blocks. Now, when you're looking at your phone, you're on Waze or you're on Maps, it shows that there's traffic congestion. Now, imagine if you go on your phone and you see there's traffic congestion, that will make you then want to revert routes and go to a different route. So now you're controlling this human behavior, understanding their connection between the phone, not wanting to be late, the stress of traffic, then end up making traffic in another high area zone. Now think about that if there's an emergency and there's a fire and somebody's rerouting you somewhere else. Understanding the human connection between these platforms, right? And the human being and you being the weak link. If your mind is low, if you're not thinking, but how would you know? Not only that, there is meta warfare on these AI machines. They did a study to where they showed how the AI interprets the world around it. So let's say that an AI recognizes a stop sign and you have some of these automated cars. But what happens when you put black tape over 30% of that stop sign? Does it still recognize it as a stop sign, or do it keep going and crash into another car, causing a traffic issue? These type of studies are happening because they're trying to figure out, as the world is becoming more digital, how do we keep this thing safe? Because there's going to be different type of attacks and manipulations and narrative warfare played upon the people, pushing fear onto the people and utilizing that state to manipulate them. Don't you know that Russia has spent money on disinformation campaigns on black voters to get them to vote a certain way during the election? Creating whole entire articles that didn't exist. Things that we want to believe. So, of course, it was easy for us to believe. So we automatically took it in. Then think about your child. What are they watching? What are they listening to? Who are they becoming? What narratives are they following? Are they a weak target for it? This is why consciousness has to be raised, because this is how you protect the culture. You have to protect the mind of the culture and the consciousness itself and see culture as a consciousness. Now, I don't have time to go deep into every single layer. We will get into that another day. But for now, I want you to think and understand That is not a physical war. It is a psychic war. It is a war of the mind. And without that ability to think for self, without that hypervigilance that is always thinking before it is intaking, without you being in a state, because even loneliness itself makes you susceptible to this type of warfare. And America is actually going through a loneliness epidemic. Finding comfort into anything. They say loneliness is worse than 15 cigarettes on the health. So when these stats are coming out, these stats are not good. They're looking at this and understanding that, damn, our population is susceptible, meaning the country is susceptible, meaning you can't control the grid. So when we think about that in the culture, and you watch that movie Sinners, who is the most stressed out with the most to lose? You had the Asian lady in there. So that means Renrick went after the Asian lady and told her, listen, your daughter, why? Because he understood the memories. He understood what made her tick. So therefore, he used her to infiltrate because the building didn't change. The rules of the magic of their world didn't change. The thing that changed was the infiltration in the mind of somebody on the inside, the weakest link. And by absorbing the memories of her husband, he understood how to attack her. Well, what happens when these algorithms understand you? So I want you all to think about that. I want you all to understand this cognitive warfare, and I want you all to share this with somebody as well, because this is not just a conversation. This is warfare. This is very real. You need to protect your mind during this time. And there are tools that can help, such as meditation, right? Such as what we intake and us filtering our information environment, such as writing and reading, right? And working out and being in motion, right? And being in communities of people and having purpose and reason for what you do in life. These things matter more than ever. This is why we have High Level Club. This is why we're building out a few other things that will be coming soon, because the deeper I study the problem, right, it lets me know, number one, I'm on the right path. But number two, we must be able to not only teach what the problem is, but to build and construct the solutions. I want you to spend time meditating and thinking. I want you to be careful as you're scrolling, you're asking whose narrative this is. And as we go throughout time, and I'll continue some of this series online and offline, because we will be building in the community about these lessons of how to develop a powerful mind that cannot be controlled. And once you become this powerful, you become a leader. You become somebody the rest of the world looks up to. You learn how to save yourself individually. You learn how to save your family, your child, right? You learn how to save your environment. It allows you to be able to build wealth, because when somebody knows that you are susceptible to that weakness, what are they trying to sell you? Something that fills that, and it usually comes in the form of unnecessary luxuries. So therefore, we have wasteful spending habits. We're listening to things just because we want a stimulation boost, because that's what the instinctual mammal mind wants. We have to stay in high level conversation. We have to develop supermind so that we have our own self-agency during this time. And we have to develop a level of complexity that becomes our mental firewall so nobody can hack our mind. Because if you don't program your mind, somebody else will. Make sure you go to www.asupermind.com and go to 19keys.com. I will be in your city soon, and we'll be giving you the keys, right? The blueprints, the framework to develop this mental cognitive defense for adults and children, right? How to set this up in your family, how to develop that family office, how to make sure there is no weakness in you or your family, Because if we're going to continue to be utilizing this internet, we have to make sure this internet is not utilizing us. And this AI is getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So that if you don't develop this complexity of optimal consciousness, it's no longer what people consider to be a luxury. It's a necessity. I appreciate y'all tuning in. And if y'all would like to support this live stream, go to supermind.com. Let me get a comment one. If you go tap into your supermind and you will optimize your consciousness this evening. Oh, you know what? This is what I want you to do. Yeah. You see that little barcode? Make sure you screenshot that and lock in. All right. We also have the chocolates that have the lion's mane in it and the gummies. And this is just the physical products, but as we're building out the community and the course, we're going to have some of the strongest minds in the world, right? When you all see, today is just me kind of freestyling with the information that I've been studying. But when you get into the full course, right, and you get into the full community and you develop this level of consciousness, right, success is yours because you learn how to navigate and become a mastermind in this world. And there's not enough masterminds in this world. There's way too many weak minds that don't know how to navigate this world, right? Don't know how to master the AI, don't know how to master themselves and the finances, right? Don't know how to move in this system and are afraid. You can have clarity, you can have increased willpower, you can have strength, right? You can have what we call mental resilience, the ability to get out of shape but then get right back into shape, right? Clarity of thought, I think, is the number one key. All right, when you clear thinking and you focus and you can have joy in your life, right? And you become that person that everybody is coming to, not in a way that stresses you out because they know you have abundance. And then you started focusing on the things that give you more gratitude. So you activate that reticular activation system, which the brain is consistently identifying the things that it's thinking about, which you start to develop passion in life. You should have abundance. We live in an age of abundance, but you have to be clear-minded because a distraction mind is a fool's mind. So wouldn't you like to be clear? Wouldn't you like to alleviate the stress? Right? Wouldn't you like to learn how to communicate better with yourself and the world, which increases the confidence, which increases your salesmanship, which increases your sales, which increases your wealth? Family, I appreciate y'all tapping in as y'all always do, right? I want you to understand how near and dear this particular subject is and why I will be going into this subject over the next few months of optimizing your consciousness and making sure you have that mental security and that cognitive security. And make sure you share this with somebody else as well. Peace to the family, peace to the gods. Make sure you tap into your supermind. May you all rise.